Hello and welcome back. I've just finished reading Sapiens by Yuval Noah Harari, the 500-page beast, and what a book it is. I thoroughly enjoyed it. It's a huge book, loads and loads of information in there, so there's no way I can sit here and do a video about it without the video being about 5 hours long. So what I've done is I've narrowed down 5 main things that I've learned from reading this book. The 5 most interesting things that I have taken from Sapiens. So without wasting any time, here we go. Number 1, imagined realities. So the book starts off talking about ancient humans when we used to be hunter-gatherers. Obviously we had no language back then, but sometime between 70,000 years ago and 30,000 years ago there was something called the cognitive revolution. Nobody really knows how or why it happened, but basically we became smarter. We started going into caves and painting drawings and making sculptures and things like that. But most importantly, we invented language and we started talking to each other. Now, the biggest influence of this wasn't talking about objects that were there, like saying things like rock or stick or food, things like that. The biggest revolution came when we started to be able to talk about things that weren't there. Imagine things like myths and gods and stories and stuff like that. When we developed that ability, we could then use that to control large groups of humans. Because before language came along, when we were hunter-gatherers, we used to go around in packs of 5 or 10 maybe, very small groups, and that was it. You had all these small groups roaming around Africa, and they weren't really, each group was a separate clan. But when we started talking about these myths and made up stories, we could get other people to believe in these stories, and then we used that to control mass groups. And then all of a sudden we had these big societies, and where everyone believed in the same thing. And it's still present today, of course, and Harari uses a very interesting example. He uses the example of limited companies. Today, if you can start up a limited company, let's say a building company, like X Builders. You could go around to somebody's house to do some building work, and you could completely make a mess of it and mess everything up. But then you could kind of get away with it by shutting the company down, and then just saying it wasn't me, it was the company. It was the fault of the company, not the workers. And a judge will actually accept that. The police will accept it. Even the person who got conned will accept it, because we know that a limited company is like a standalone thing. A company it isn't the workers, it isn't the building materials, it's the company, and that's separate. But everybody knows at the same time that it's not true. Everybody knows that the workers are responsible, but it's all about these imagined realities, and also money as well. Money doesn't exist, and he points out that things like human rights don't exist. But again, we all accept it as fact. And we speak about these things as though they're like tangible objects, but they're not. They exist only in our minds. So that's a big thing that I got from the book, these imagined realities. Number 2, the agricultural revolution. About 10,000 years ago, there was another revolution called the agricultural revolution. And it basically means we went from being hunter-gatherers roaming across Africa. We stopped roaming and moving every day, and we settled down on farms. and we started growing our own crops. Yeah, that happened about 10 years ago. Most people think that that was a very good thing for humanity. They see it as a kind of progressive step forward. But Harari puts that to bed. He says no, it certainly wasn't a good thing for human beings. Our lives went drastically downhill when we became farmers. That's due to a number of reasons. First off, the working hours. Okay, when we were hunter-gatherers, we went out and picked fruit and we hunted animals. If we caught an animal, we probably spent the rest of the day just skinning it and making a fire or whatever. But when we became farmers, all of a sudden we had to work for 12 to 14 hours a day looking after this patch of land, looking after some wheat. We had to water it, keep the soil clean, keep the insects away. It was almost like we had this baby that had to be constantly looked after, and it was terrible for humankind. Our diet went downhill and became less varied. We didn't eat fruit and meat and all these different the roots out the ground. All of a sudden we were eating one thing and one thing only, you know, like wheat or one type of vegetable. And if there was a flood or a drought or anything, we were stuffed. All of our food was gone. Also diseases as well. When we were hunter-gatherers, we were in packs of 5. If there was a disease, about 5 people might have died. But on a farm with dozens of people, everyone got it. And what else was there? We just basically became servants. Some people think that the crops became our slave. We started growing crops and manipulating them, so people think that the crops became the victim. But no, actually we became the servant. We became the servant to the crops. We had to look after it every day, like a big... The crop was like the big king lying down on the ground, and we had to run around looking after it, basically. And it wasn't good for us at all. And Harari uses an analogy of business. A business has one objective, and that's to grow and earn more money. The main objective of a business is not the happiness of its employees. It's just making more and more money. So the agricultural revolution was good for humanity in the sense that we had more babies and the population grew, but in terms of happiness of the individual, it was a very bad thing indeed. And he points out this terrifying another analogy. It's like he describes the agricultural revolution as a trap that we walked into, and once the trap went off, we couldn't walk back out of it. So once we started becoming farmers, we had more food, and then once we had more food, we had more babies, and the population went up and up and up. And once that happened, once the trap was set, there was no going back out of it, because if we left the farm and went back to being hunter-gatherers, there were too many mouths to feed, and we couldn't feed all those mouths by picking fruit off trees and hunting the odd deer or whatever. By that time it was too late. So it's quite a scary analogy. The agricultural revolution was a deadly trap that we walked into completely unwittingly, and we couldn't walk back out of it. Number 3, European imperialism. Everybody knows that a few hundred years ago, the European Empire ruled the world. There might have been several of them, but basically, you know, Europeans conquered the world, and we explored all of these lands and took them all over and stuff. Now, people see that as a bad thing generally, and you know, obviously aspects of it were. We kind of we colonized the world and made people slaves or whatever. But Harari points out an interesting point, that the way Europeans were able to do that because we were willing to admit ignorance. Now bear with me on this, it will make sense. Most empires in the past were quite religious, and religion claims to know everything. It's like we have all the answers. If anything, if you need to know the answer to any mystery, just say God did it or whatever. We've got everything, that's that. And so most empires didn't expand. They just stayed in one place and they pretended to know all the answers. But in Europe, there might have been religion, but it wasn't that dominant at the time. And so everybody was willing to say, there's loads of stuff out there that we don't know about and we don't know the answers for. So let's go out there and discover the world. Let's go out there and find the answers. So the European domination of the world began through an admission of ignorance. People just saying, I don't know all the answers. Let's go out there and let's discover science. Let's discover things. It's just an interesting take on the whole European expansion. That's number 3. Number 4 on the list is happiness. There's a whole entire chapter in the book devoted to happiness and where you can find happiness. And Harari mentions 3 possible paths to happiness. The first one is very scientific. So if you ask most biologists about happiness and where it can be found, they will claim it's all about biochemistry and how much serotonin is in your body. Now, everybody is born with a different level of serotonin in their body, and how much you have depends on how happy you are. An analogy is used with a room with air conditioning. Imagine there's an air conditioner that's set to 10 degrees Celsius. That room will always be at the same temperature, 10 degrees. There might be certain things that raise the temperature or lower it, as in the window being opened or somebody walking in the door. But after a while, if the air conditioner is set to 10 degrees, the temperature will level out and it will go back to that default temperature. Humans apparently are like that. So if you've got a serotonin level of 5, your happiness level will be 5. There might be factors that can affect your happiness, such as getting a pay rise or getting into a fight. A pay rise might make you happier. If you get into a fight, you might be more sad. But after a while, if your serotonin level is on 5, you will go back to that default level of happiness. So ask a biologist and it will be about biochemistry. But a second option might be all about self-delusion. So basically, the harsh truth of life is that we all evolved here by accident. We're all here for a process of evolution by natural selection. We live in a universe that doesn't care about us, and we're basically here by accident. Now that's too much for some people to deal with. So some people become happy by deluding themselves. An obvious one is religion. A religious person will give his life meaning by believing that when he dies he will go to a nice place called heaven or whatever. On the other hand, a nationalist, somebody who believes in his country, might join the army, and he might delude himself into thinking that his life has meaning because he's going to war to fight for his country, and so he's devoting his life to something worthwhile. A capitalist believes that life is all about getting more and more money and growing a business. So somebody might start up their own business and be happy because they will believe that their life has meaning because they're reaching some ultimate goal. A third option, according to Harari, might be linked to Buddhism, the Buddhist philosophy. Buddhist philosophy is quite clever. It claims that if somebody's unhappy, it's because they want something. And to gain happiness, you should get rid of all wants and desires. For example, you might really want a new car, and so you'll be unhappy because you don't have the car, and you'll work really hard, and you'll save more and more money, and eventually you might get the car, and then you might be happy for about 2 weeks or a month, and then the novelty will wear off, and then you'll want something else, and then you'll be unhappy again. So according to Harari, it's all about accepting what you have and accepting what comes and goes and getting rid of all wants. That's the Buddhist idea, sorry. So happiness might be about biochemistry, it might be about self-delusion, or it might be about adopting the Buddhist philosophy. Number 5, natural selection to intelligent design. So far in history, all life on Earth has got here through natural selection, evolution, like I've just said. But going into the future, Harari thinks it might switch from natural selection to intelligent design. The intelligent designers being us, of course. This also might happen in 3 ways. Genetic engineering, number 1. Cyborgs, number 2. And the engineering of inorganic life, number 3. Genetic engineering is basically altering our genes, the genes that we already have, to achieve desired results. Now in the book there's a picture of, it mentions Alba the rabbit. Now an artist back in the year 2000, I think it was, paid some scientists to genetically engineer a rabbit that glows in the dark, and they were successful. They actually did it. They extracted some genes from a creature that lives in the sea, injected them into the rabbit, and there was actually a rabbit with like fluorescent hair. Another one, I think this was in the 90s, some scientists actually managed to grow a human ear on the back of a mouse using genetic engineering. Another one, scientists once were able to identify a gene in a vole. A vole is like a small mammal, and they were able to identify a gene for monogamy. Okay, so this is genetic engineering, and in the future we might be able to manipulate our genes to create kind of superhumans or designer humans, like tailored to how we want them. It's a form of intelligent design. Cyborgs, a cyborg is like half human or half organic, half machine. In a way, we're already cyborgs. You could say somebody who wears glasses is a cyborg. Somebody who has a hearing aid is a cyborg. Or somebody who has a pacemaker in their heart is a cyborg. Of course, we've already got robotic arms that are fault controlled. People have got prosthetic limbs that are connected to their brains. We've already got that. That's cyborgs. And engineering of inorganic life basically means robots, like complete robots and AI. We all know about that stuff. So that's number 5 on the list. It's an interesting point. We're going to go from natural selection, where all life came from nature and evolution, to intelligent design. We're going to start designing life. We're going to start designing human beings. We might even put in chips in our brains to make us more intelligent. We might be able to connect brains together. All kinds of things are on the horizon. So there you go. 5 things. They were the 5 main things that I took from reading the book. As I've said, the book is a big book. It's 500 pages and it is jam-packed full of information. So there's tons more stuff in there to learn, but these were the 5 main things that I've taken away from reading the book. And Does the book deserve all the recognition? It's a very famous book. It's sold over 1 million copies. It's got a review from Bill Gates, and in my opinion, yes, it does deserve it. It does something very impressive. It takes a very complex subject like history, the history of humankind, and it makes it really enjoyable and easy to read. The prose is very easy. It's surprisingly easy to read, this book. So I highly recommend this one. I don't recommend every book that I read, but this one, yes. It's worth the time and it's worth the money. So go and check it out. Before you go, I want to get your opinion on something. I've just got some business cards printed out. Full colour, double-sided business cards. They're very different. I've designed these myself. I've showed them to a couple of friends and they've been like, what the hell is that? There's too much stuff going on, but personally I think they look good. So this is the front. Take a look at that. It's got both my books there. My first book, my second book, my website address at the bottom, and on the other side, check that out. My artwork, my YouTube channel, my website address. I'm quite happy with them. They're not like the usual business cards you see, but I think that's good. Why would you want your business cards to look like everyone else's? You want them to stand out. So, thanks for watching. I'll be back in about 2 or 3 weeks with another book review. I might do a video about J.G. Ballard, actually. If you're a fan of J.G. Ballard, watch this space. I think I might do one on him. If you don't know who J.G. Ballard is, watch this space also. You can learn. Thanks for watching. In the meantime, until my next video, check out jamesflynn.org for more of my content, and have a great day on this weird, strange, peculiar rock we call Earth, and I'll see you next time. Goodbye.